Unlike last week, I decided to make a little change on the advice of some people at the club. Last time I showed you some theoretical positions, and I figured that sometimes other instructors also show it to you, and then there's some repetition. This time I kind of try to do something that is not your typical book-like win, but rather examples that are typical of certain endings. So we're going to do a few pawn endings, we're going to do a few rook endings, and then I'm going to show you a position that is a queen versus two rooks, and talk a little about that. So we'll start with some pawn endings, and I will have to assume that most of you, or all of you, already know how to win king and pawn versus king. Last time I was talking about it, and I was mentioning how when the pawn is on the same level of the king or behind the king, then it's always a draw on an empty board, king and pawn, and how if the king is in front of the pawn, then whoever has the opposition gets his way. So sometimes it's a win, and sometimes it's a draw. And it's important for our pawn endings, otherwise if you don't know it, then it's a bit hard. So we'll start with this position. This is a really great composition. I wish I remember who composed it, because I usually like to give credit, but I don't have it. And this is white to move. It looks like white is completely lost. But pawn endings are the work of the devil. If you are wrong by one tempo, then a win can turn into a loss, and sometimes you can save lost position. You see, in the ending books, you can see many grandmasters really losing their way in pawn endings. Here, off the cuff, when you look at the position, it looks like it's resigning time for white. How can he possibly save the position? Black has two good pawns, and the black king easily stops the white pawn. So still, you will see that there's a tricky way, and again, it's based on knowing the opposition, to make a draw here. So, of course, you'll see that if white just plays, let's say the first move is the same, and of course, black has to defend his pawn, and let's pretend that white will now go backwards or something, then of course it'll be a technical win. Or for example, let me make it even more challenging, like let's say here, and the black king goes here. Let's say white marks time, waiting, and black is attacking the pawn, and white has to defend the pawn. Could have also been from this direction, and now d5, and white has to let go of the pawn. Of course, he loses. Right? So regular means there's no way for white to save the game. However, from the starting position, like we said, the way to do it is actually the paradoxical sacrificing of his own pawn. So temporarily, white is going to be down two pawns, but he's going to save a draw, again, based on the opposition. So king f5. Well, in 1 second, I will take the pawn on f6. Then it'll be black who has to worry about the draw. So king g7, the only move. Again, it looks like white is just lost. Any king retreat, and again, black is going to go king f8 and king e7, just like we saw. However, e7, king f7, again, black looks really confident. Again, he's just about to take the pawn on e7, after which he's going to be down two pawns. But white plays the surprising e8 equals queen check. You must take. And black must be still really confident that he's going to win the game, because after king takes f6, king d7 and king c6, he is going to get the position where he has the opposition with the king in front of the pawn, as all of you must know by now. However, white plays the wonderful move king e6. Again, sometimes it's really such a paradoxical decision. You're so hungry to take the pawn, you think, I'm down two pawns in the pawn ending. What can be more alarming than that? But then king e6, and now basically any black move is going to be a draw, because if you go this way, then of course I'm going to take this pawn. And if you go the other way, I'm going to take the other pawn. And any attempt in pushing one of the pawns forward, I'm just going to be in a simple king behind this pawn ending. Let's say, for example, this. Then I take, king here. I can afford to let go of the opposition for a moment because the position of the pawn. And after king e6, king f4, with a simple draw, right? We know already. We discussed it last week. After here, I wait. When you show yourself opposition, all the way down the board where it's stalemate. Okay, so again, notice the importance of oppositions in pawn endings. Okay, example number 2. Let's see, let's do this one. Okay, this one actually comes with a little story, very short story, that sometimes people ask me, hey Aviv, how many moves ahead can you see in a chess game? That is, of course, a very difficult question. I think one of the masters of the past, maybe it was Tartakov or Tarish, who said that he always sees just one move, but it's the best move. But that's kind of a smart aleck answer. The correct answer, it really depends on the position. In some complicated positions, if you can see 2-3 moves ahead, you are really lucky. And in some positions, you can see many moves ahead. So I like to give this position as a homework position, as a homework exercise to my students. And I insist that they come up only with a complete and full solution. And this is an example that you can really calculate an ending for a very, very long time. So you look at the position, and again, when you take the first look, you think that white is not happy. It looks like right now, because it's white to move, that means that black has the opposition. And whichever side white chooses, like if he goes king left to d3, then there's going to be a capture and the king is going to penetrate. Or if you go this way, then the king is going to go to d4. The black king is going to d4. Looks very gloomy. Okay, what's more, if you play pawn takes pawn on g5, f takes g5, and black has the outside passed pawn, which is going to rush down the board. By the time the white king is going to try to stop it, black is going to take the pawn and then go munch on the other pawns with a very easy win. However, when we talk about outside passed pawns, now it's white's turn to create the passed pawn. So this is the kind of answer that you see that everything is kind of forced. Now, I'm not giving you any time and you're not trying to solve it, so I'm not really being fair to you. But you can imagine that if you had ample time at home to look at it, you probably would come up with some, if not all, of the solution. So of course, the first move has to be g4. Again, somewhat paradoxical, but when you look at it, you start to understand, wow, this is really, it's working. It's really a good move. Now, the simple thing is that I just want to take on h5 and then rush my pawn. Notice that the black king has a little problem with the queening square because this pawn is not letting him cross and his own pawn is in the way as well on f6. Well, that's bad news. So what to do? The only move, of course, to keep fighting is to take that pawn on g4. If you, for example, try to take here, and I'm going to take here, then it becomes obvious that this is just a technical win. While this king is going to try to rush and stop the pawn, I'm just going to come here and at leisurely munch this pawn. Then even if I pitch the h-pawn, I'm going to win the game by taking all the other pawns. That is really easy. So, again, we're going to try to be more challenging with h takes g4. And now the point, h5. Now black has a little bit of a headache trying to stop the pawn. But he can still stop it. He's not losing because of that pawn yet. He has two ways to play. The first one is the short answer. If he tries to play f5, the idea, of course, is that he's going to get his king into the box quickly. But of course, if pawn takes, king takes is no good solution. So watch what white does. He allows black to have a nice phalanx of pawns running down the board, which is not going anywhere. And in exchange, he's going to have two pawns that are remote from one another, and that's going to drive the black king crazy. Watch. h6, beautiful. So now, of course, you cannot afford to play a move like this, because then I'm just going to take the pawn, and you are stuck. You cannot take the pawn because I'll push the h-pawn, and you cannot come to the h-pawn. Now my king is just going to play Pac-Man. He's going to come here, here, eat everything. So instead, black needs to try the check, tempo, and the king goes back. And now I'm about to play h7, so you better do something productive. You have to go here. And now I'm going to play check, and that's what I promise you. The two pawns are driving the black king crazy. Notice that those three pawns are very nice. They look really impressive, but they're not self-supporting. You can give me one check and I'm going to move my king. That's it. They cannot queen. So of course you'd have to try to stop the pawn somehow by going here. Then I'm just going to keep pushing the pawn. And the king has a serious problem not being able to be at two places at the same time. Of course white is winning, right? Does everybody understand that? Yeah, I think that's self-explanatory. So his other try was to play in the game king e6. And now white simply corrals the g-pawn and regains the pawn he sacrificed. So we go here, 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 here. So far, I think that this was reasonable to calculate, right? One side sacrificed the pawn. You had to accept it. I started pushing the pawn in order to queen it. You had to try and chase it to stop it. In the meantime, I used the time to regain my sacrificed pawn. Now it's white to move, and he has to let go of his h-pawn. But This is the advantage of having an outside pass pawn, because you are faster. Look at what happens. King f5, king takes h5, king takes f6. Black is also running with a pass pawn. Unfortunately, white queens with check, and watch what happened now. g4, e5, g3, e6, g2, e7, g1 queen, e8 queens with check. Now, you cannot come here because this is mate. You cannot go to g4 because I'm going to go king to g8, queen to g8 and pick up your queen. So your only move is king here. And now white goes again into a pawn ending. Check, check, takes. We have again a pawn ending, and now we see the difference. The white king is not only one file closer, but it's also his move. He wins the game beautifully. King e5, king f2, king here, king here, king here, king here, takes, here, 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 here. And just as black is ready to play king c4 and draw the game, white plays king b5, and by one tempo, he won the initial position. By one tempo exactly. So if you can see the solution, if you can see the number, it's 21 moves deep. But most of my students, almost at all levels, when they get it at home and they have enough time to think about it, by trial and error, they get the solution. Because again, it's kind of self-explanatory. Okay, so we are done with this one. And now we're going to do some rook endings, which are some of my favorites. Let's see. I have several of them, but one of them I guess I didn't open, or I already closed. Let's start with, okay, let's start with my own ending, actually. Oh, I have to get rid of this thing. There we go. This is a game I played many, many years ago against another FIDE master. And in this position, white is up a pawn in the ending. But as a matter of fact, this is not very easy to win. As you can see, if white doesn't do anything productive right now, black is going to play the move b4, then he's going to play the move b3, and that pawn is going to need serious babysitting because else it's going to queen. So I have to do something about that. On the other hand, I need to think, how am I going to win? Right? Stopping the pawn is one thing, but how am I going to materialize my advantage? Well, notice that I have 4 against 2 on the king side, and especially the pawn on e5 looks very impressive. Right now, by itself, with the rook, you cannot do anything. Like if I go check, king e7 is just not very useful. So what to do in this position? The first move is forced. Really, really forced. And I was very proud of myself being able to calculate it in advance. I think that if I would not have found that move, then probably I would never have transposed to this rook ending, and that was actually the only way to win the game. So I'll show it to you and I'll try to explain. Rook a6. Step number 1. The rook is paralyzing both pawns by being here. Now, of course, if you play the move b4, I'm just going to take the pawn on a4. Now I'm up 2 pawns. This is going to be really a walk in the park, right? It's going to be super easy. So now by one move, I'm freezing both pawns. And now I'm ready for my own action, which you will see how that was done in the game. So my opponent here played the move g5 because he realized that now my intention is very simple. I want to play f4, then I want to play g4, then I want to play f5, and then with 2 pawns and the rook, it's going to be very easy to push the king backwards, and it's going to win by queening the pawn and putting the king in a mating net. So he played g5. Another try would have been to play the move rook c8. That would have been very, very interesting. And in this position, again, white is to be a little careful because, of course, the rook is coming to visit on c2. But king d3, a very, very good move. And again, my plan is very simple. I want to push the g pawn and the f pawn. I don't care what you do. So let's say check, king e3. Again, taking control of the second rank. Now, if black wants to play the move rook c8, again, trying to get to c2, notice that my king already improved its position. It's on e3, so I'm not going to be checked if you go there. And I can just start pushing my pawns. So for example, g4. Say you go here, for example. f4. Let's say you take the pawn. f5. You can see that now material is even, but while the white pawns are very well advanced, the black pawns are still kind of stuck. And my next move is going to be rook a7, keep pushing those pawns. and it's going to be just too late for those pawns. They're not well advanced, and it's going to be too much. So for example, let's say here, and I will play check. You have to go backwards, either to e8 or f8. I don't think it really matters. Then I will play something like f6, b3, e6, and the mate on a8 decides the game. So just a question of speed. So something to remember in this position, and in all rook endings, you know, there are two sayings about rook endings. One of them is the funny and generic that says, all rook endings are drawn. That's what people say, because it's so hard to win rook endings, obviously. It takes very little to just change something, and a pawn advantage is just not enough. The second saying that I'm much more in love with, I should say, is that in rook endings, the placement of the pieces is more important than the number of the pawns. In other words, you have to count pawns. Sure, if somebody's up 6 pawns, chances are he will win, right? But if there's like 1 or 2 pawn advantage, it's really important to see where the pieces are. If, for example, one king is up the middle of the board, like let's say the 5th or 6th rank, and the other one is boxed into the last rank, and let's say there's one rook who's very active and cutting him off, and the other rook is just roaming somewhere, then you can even be down material, down 1 or 2 pawns, or especially even material, and it wouldn't matter. The placement of your pieces is going to decide the outcome. And this is one of those positions. It's not so much the extra pawn that I have. For example, the a2 pawn is not super valuable, but the fact that I'm having my rook is cutting the king off, this pawn is advanced, and my king has a free roam down the board. So after g5, I played king e3, rook here, king e4. I'm just ditching all my pawns. You can take all my pawns because, again, I'm going to win with just my advanced pawn and my rook. So he played here, king f5. Again, this proves the statement that I made before. The placement of the pieces is much more important than the number of the pawns. He can take all the pawns on the second rank, but he won't be able to stop my pawn. And okay, he starts taking, good for him. Check, the king has to go backwards. Here, if he goes king f8, it's even easier, because then I play king f6 threatening mate. So he goes here, and now I'm just advancing my king. Again, he can take all the pawns that he wants. He realized that I'm threatening to play e6, so he tried to play here. For a moment you might say, wow, Aviv, not only did you give your pawn back, but you're about to lose another pawn with check. For example, if you play e6, rook takes f3 check, and you're worse. But again, in positions like this, the pawn is so advanced, the king is so advanced, the win is just there. Rook a8 check, king d7, e6 check. Now I'm interested in pushing the pawn to e7. So king d6, praying that maybe I will blunder with e7, and then rook takes f3, and I have to let go of the pawn. But white wins with rook d8, king c7, e7, game over. After rook takes f3, I can take the pawn on g5, or if I'm in the mood, I can just play here, just so he doesn't check me anymore. And I'm winning. Of course, the pawn is unstoppable. Did you guys understand? Awesome. Okay, so we are done with that. Okay, this is one of the first rook endings that I studied many years ago. And it's quite famous. You can see it in books, and you can see it in lectures. If some of you recognize it, I won't be surprised. I was really amazed to see how, with so little material, and with the pawn split, and the black king claiming some stake in the center, also there's a d5 pawn in the center, how on earth can something like this be winning for one side? It looks like just a simple draw. Who can believe that from a position like this, white can practically force black to lose both his pawns? Which looks almost paradoxical, looks ridiculous, right? It looks like I'm making a statement that I cannot back. Let's talk about why is white winning in this position. Again, the placement of the pieces. The rook is behind his pawn, and that rook is very passively blocking it, which means any rook move, my pawn is going to keep pushing. And again, keeping in mind that many pawn endings are going to be won, black's hands are tied. What to do now? Black is probably seeking some activity. For example, maybe king b4, king b3, and tickling this pawn. Can you imagine? Then he's going to start pushing his b pawn, and well, he might get counterplay. So in this position, someone like Lasker, he was a world champion for 27 years. He is not going to miss this idea. First move, rook f4. Cutting the king off. And of course, if the black king comes backwards, then my king wants to step in. The white idea is just to chase the rook. In other words, if I can get king d4, king e5, and then f6, f7, I'm just going to win the game prosaically. So black tries to play his best chance, pawn to b4. Again, the ball is in white's court. What to do? And white plays a very, very quiet move, pawn b3. The idea is to freeze the black pawn from moving, period. Notice that now he is kind of running out of moves. He has real issues. If he plays the move d4, with the idea that if the rook takes, he will lose this pawn. Yeah, in your dreams, right? Then after d4, king e4. Can you all see that? If the pawn goes to d4, white goes king e4. Game over. I'm just going to go king e5, or I'm going to win the pawn. So he has to play this move. This is a kind of a clever move. He moves the rook one square, trying to provoke the pawn to advance, because knowing maybe then the black king and the black rook can corral it, maybe he can win it in some positions. Of course, white calculated that. He goes here, king d6, king d4, king e6. And in this position again, it's a question of calculation, what to do, how to win the game. So again, white plays a very simple move, rook to f1. The rook is done with his job of cutting the king on the 4th rank. And now he is challenging black to say, okay, you have a chance to be up material if you feel like it. Take my pawn. But obviously you cannot do that. If he takes the pawn, then after takes, and you can already see we're going to have a pawn ending with a very easy win. After here, 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 here. Just when you're good and ready to go king b6 and gain the opposition, surprise, I already have the opposition and I'm clearing the way to the pawn, just like we saw last week, those of you who were here, with a very easy win. So, okay, so you can't take the pawn. After this move, then what? Okay, you can't allow my king to penetrate, so king d6. Now it's like white is being challenged. Well, all black wants to do in life is to dance. King e6, king d6, and vice versa. And how are you going to make progress? Once you try to approach this pawn, then you might lose this pawn. That doesn't look like a win. But again, by very simple tactical means, white advances his position. Look, rook a1. Now the rook penetrates from the side. Beautiful. Of course, we know that the pawn on f6 is immune, because it will transpose to the variation we just saw where white will play check, trade rooks, and win the pawn ending. So he tries to free his rook. Check. Here. Rook b6. Again, a beautiful move. He is not rushing to take the pawn on d5. That pawn is not going anywhere. But maybe rook c3 might come to visit, right? Getting the rook active and maybe winning the b pawn. So he says to him, I'm first. Now I'm just ready to take the pawn on b4, then take the pawn on d5, and that's what actually happens. He played king here, trying to stop the pawn. Hard to suggest anything else. Really, his hands are tied. I'm about to win both pawns. So he played here. The first pawn falls. Nuh-uh, we're not giving any pawns here. Rook here, the second pawn falls. Now it was a good time for Rubinstein to resign, but he's playing by inertia. Just for the record, I'll show you how it ended. After here, 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 here. One rook is defending the pawn. The king is advancing the other pawn. Very, very simple. And here he resigned. Understood? Again, the placement of the pieces, very important in rook endings. Okay. Now I want to show you two kind of unique positions that I really, really like. One is a composition, I'm assuming, because I don't think it's from a real game. And it goes to show, again, many times I'm asked, what is better, a queen or two rooks? And again, it's a very, very individual answer. I should give a very, very specific answer. It really depends on the position. For example, in some positions, the rook are free. On open files, many times they can cut off a king on the last rank. Two rooks, can you imagine rooks on the 7th and your king is all the way down? Then unless the queen has some amazing perpetual, it's almost always lost. The queen is just helpless against two monster rooks, like we call pigs on the 7th. And sometimes the queen is so agile against clumsy rook that the rooks are just unable to withstand the force of the queen. This is a beautiful example for that. Here the queen is beating the two rooks. But you have to play a series of only moves, because here the difference is not between a win and a draw, but a win and a loss. So let's take a look at the position. Materially speaking, black is up material. He has 14 points to white's 11. So it's almost like a piece up. You think, well, that should be easy. But the queen is the queen doesn't get 9 points in a raffle. The queen gets 9 points because it's a monster piece. And here it's going to show why. Now, every move is forced, but white completely overtakes the position. I can tell you that if you don't play those moves, black is going to consolidate. In this position, all black wants to do is not get mated, get his rooks on open files. Even if he end up pitching a pawn, let's say either the e pawn or the a pawn, it doesn't really matter because he has more than enough pawns. So you can imagine if I play something like, let's say, in the game white plays h6. Let me play another move just to show you. Let's say white plays some random move just to pass on the turn to black. And black is going to play here to stop this. Now it's over, lost for white completely. Because all I want to do is I'm going to play something like rook e8 and just push my e pawn. If you stop it, I'm going to push my f pawn. My king is always hiding in the corner. And the two rooks with the pass pawn, even one pawn, but two pawns even easier, the queen is no match. But, like I said, it's white to move, and watch what he does. First move, h6, threatening mate. Well, if you're black, you have an easy no-brainer. Anything but g6 is going to go to an early lunch with tears, right? So g6, exactly. And now, said, queen b2, again, forced. Because in this position, all I need to do is play something like f6. Black wants to play something like f6, then rook f7. He is defending the vulnerable 7th and 8th ranks. And then guess what? The other rooks are just going to push those pawns up. No win for white. So white plays the monster move, queen here. Now again, black has an only move because he's about to go. If he goes, he has to play e5. He must give the pawn. The only move to stop mate, other move is to play f6. But the problem is that then I'm going to go queen b7 with a double threat. I'm threatening mate, and I'm threatening the rook on a8. So after the move rook f7, queen takes rook on a8. Well, this is just going to win in a very simple way, right? I'm winning the rook, and my queen is just going to zigzag close, and there's going to be mate. So no can do. He's got to play e5. And again, white must continue with a plan. Oopsie. Queen takes e5, threatening mate again. And now f6. Now we see the difference. The e pawn was sacrificed so that the queen cannot come to b7 and bother the other rook while this rook wants to defend. So, of course, queen e7, rook f7 loses for white. So what does he do? Queen d5 check. Beautiful. Again, the only move, but enough to win. What is the point of this move? Again, we are forking the king and the rook. So we're not allowing rook f7 because queen takes rook in the corner mate. Well, not mate, but almost mate. So the only move is king here. And now, queen b7, another brilliant move. Not giving you a chance to take any control of the 7th rank. Now black has, again, an only move. Again, what does this example illustrate? The strength of the queen and the clumsiness of the rooks. Not a very fair example, but sometimes you do it to illustrate a point. So rook here. Still, I have to tell you, black looks really good. In one move, I'm going to play rook from a to f8. Then I'm going to just send my g pawn, and I'm just going to be okay. So white plays the monster move, queen e7. Threatening queen f6 check. If you push the f pawn, then it's still mate. I'm going to go queen e5 or queen f6 and mate. So you have to do this now. And now in this specific position, you have to be a little bit careful. You play king a4. If you try to play h4, looks like you're paralyzing the opponent's pieces because notice, the king can't move, the rook on g8 can't move, the rook on f8 can't move, the pawn can't move, this pawn can't move, and this pawn can't move. You're not moving a lot of pieces. But in this position, this pawn can move because if the pawn takes, I'm taking this pawn with check, giving you no time. You see, it's a check on the king on a5. So there's no time to take the pawn, and then my rook is just going to come back. Not ideal. So, white plays king a4, and now it's over. Now black is in Zugzwang. He loses. Because after g5, king a3, kind of funny thing, white doesn't do anything productive. He just says to black, okay, you do something. Now keep making moves, good luck. And now all of a sudden he ran out of moves. He cannot move this rook, obviously. If you move the rook to g6, I'm going to take on f8. If you move the rook away, if you go to f7, I take. If you move it away from the file, Queen takes f6 is mate. The king can't move, this pawn can't move. If you go g4, I'll just take it and say thank you very much. If you push the f pawn, queen e5 is mate. So basically you'll have to play something like this. Then I'm just going to play king a2. You have to keep pushing. Then I play king a3. Complete Zugzwang. The powerful queen just won the game. You have many pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces. This you can't move, this you can't move legally. Everything else just loses. So black has to give up. Did you understand the illustration of the queen strength? Again, not a very fair position because sometimes it's the two rooks are dominating, but that was just a composition, showing the strength of the queen. Okay. Now I have one of my most amazing games ever, maybe, reached this position. This is a game that I played many, many years ago. And for many years, I can tell you, we analyzed this was a very exciting game and a very exciting ending. And I've analyzed it with my opponent and several strong players afterwards. Nobody came even close to finding the truth in the position. For maybe 10 or 15 years, I walked around thinking that I played almost a perfect game with a beautifully crafted ending, until I put it in the computer. And I put it in the computer just disagrees. Not only did he disagree with me, saying that it was just a draw, in this position it's a draw, but the winning plan that I was playing, if I was following it against what seemed to be a really foolish plan by black, I would have lost. And I can tell you that I would have played it. For sure I would have played it. So let's take a look. It's a really exciting bishop ending. Okay, I even play black next move just to be in the area. And when you look at it, you think, well, black is up a pawn, but his pawns are worthless. On the other hand, just like we saw in the previous examples of pawn endings and rook endings, white has a pass pawn on one wing and another pass pawn on another. And you think, well, this is looking really awesome, right? White looks like he's just going to win the game. And, well, that's what I thought as well. I played the obvious bishop e7. And now my opponent lost in a very prosaic way. He thought, well, there's no defense against bishop f6. That's what I thought, and I thought, you know, you have no time to take the pawn on b6, because if you take the pawn on b6, let's say, then I'm going to play bishop f6. You can take, because the king can't stop the pawn. And when you move the bishop somewhere, let's say here or whatever, I will play h6, and my next move is going to be g6, and the pawn queen, one of the pawns queen. I thought, that's it, brilliant, right? 2 pawns against 4, and I'm winning with my last pawn. My next move is going to be another pawn sack, and my last pawn is going to become a queen. This is almost like an achievement in minimalism, right? Unfortunately, my calculations were not right. My opponent should have played the fantastic move bishop c3. Now, when I saw the computer suggested, I thought that I have to change computers. I thought that something is wrong with my engine. I thought, I mean, this is such a doofus move. There's just no way that this is going to work. What is the idea? Okay, it's kind of nice if just. If I take the bishop, then the pawn is going to queen. Brilliant. But what if I don't take it? What is the point of this? How does this help if I play bishop f6? And I know that in the game I would have played bishop f6. So I played bishop f6 against the computer, and I'm saying, okay, why is this a draw? Now he says, no, it's not a draw. You're right. You're losing. And I'm like, no way. There's no. How can I lose this position? I mean, my king is stopping the pawns, and now I have pawns on both sides of the board. I'm winning. What do you mean I'm losing? And then he plays another move, and I almost fell from my chair. He played this. My computer suggested this. And this is like from confusion to complete oblivion. What is going on here? He just made a little nook for his bishop, then he closed it, right? Almost like a little tent, and now he zipped it. And how does this help? I'm just going to win, right? So sure enough, I pushed my pawn to h6. I'm ready to play g6 like in the game, right? Against the computer, and the computer says, well, f2. Now it kind of dawned on me. Now I understood his evil idea. The point was that after this move, only move to stop the pawn, he's about to queen with check. He is going to go d3, check. Okay, I got to take the pawn. d2, he's threatening to queen the pawn. Must play here. f3. Now we see the evil of bishop c3. He is defending his pawn. That was the purpose of making that little hiding, a little tent. And after my move king d1, or else the pawn is going to queen, he's going to go f2, And the computer is right. White is lost. Just fantastic. I mean, I was totally amazed by this ending. I have a friend who is a grandmaster in composition, and I sent him this position because I told him, you got to be able to create something, and he said that he's going to try. Because really an unusual move. Bishop to c3, think about it. Oopsie. How often do you see a move like this? You're about to face a disaster of pawns queening, and all of a sudden this. Bishop f6, losing. I can still play other moves. I can play, for example, bishop back to c5, and that's okay. Or I can play g6, just trade my pawns before they are lost. And then it's a draw. You cannot win it, but I cannot win it either. If I try to force the win, like we saw, zipping the tent, and now I'm lost. It's too late. I cannot fix it. Any move is going to lead to f2. Whatever I do now is going to lead to. If I try to play g6 instead, that's no solution, because again, after here, check, and he just takes my bishop. So I lose as well. Just incredible. I find it to be really, really amazing. Well, I'll show you what happened in the game very quickly. After bishop g7, bishop f6, he cannot take. So here, bishop d4. That is what I calculated. That's what I thought was the only move. Now my bishop is defending my b pawn. He is stopping his pawns on the f file. And now the win is really easy. He played here, I played here, fixing the pawns, and he resigned. I mean, there's just no defense against g6. I'm just going to go g6. So if you play, let's say, king c6, g6. If you take the h pawn, my h6 pawn, I will take on h7. If you take on g6, I will push h7, and my opponent resigned in this position. So, thank goodness for computers finding the truth in endings, huh? Here is another ending that kind of follows what I told you before about the placement of the pieces and the number of the pawns. This is a very nice ending between two very strong masters of the past. The player with the white pieces, Frank J. Marshall, one of the best American players of all time, a great tactician, and Mikhail Chigorin is black, a strong Russian grandmaster level player. And in this position, it's obvious that black has a good position, no question about it. We know that the fewer pawn islands or groups that you have, the better off you are normally, because that means that your pawns are self-supporting. And for example, now the A pawn is isolated, the D pawn is isolated, while those pawns are supporting each other, and those pawns are part of a chain, just like this one. And you think, hey, it's black on the move. What could be simpler than playing rook c3 check, followed by rook takes a3? Beautiful, right? I'm going to be up 2 passed pawns on the queen side. That has to win simply. But Chigorin knows endings, and he knows that this is going to be too much of a counterplay, and he played king e6. Had he played this, king e4, rook takes a3, rook c2, and the rook is coming to the 7th rank, all of a sudden, this is not so winning. This is become much harder, maybe not even winning, because the rook is going to be behind the pawns, just like we saw in my example, and the d pawn is about to rush down the board. The king is going to be either away from the arena or cut off on the last rank, and this is becoming very, very difficult. Now the win, if it even exists, is hard to come by. So instead, he says, well, I mean, I'm not in a hurry to take your pawns. Your pawns are very weak. I'll take them at my leisure. And he played the very strong move, king e6. Beautiful. Again, worrying about the placement of the king closer to the pawn, closer to the center. And the rook now is not moving from the c-file, not letting white conquer the c-file. So white played rook to b3, trying to save his pawn. King d5, rook d3. Again, for a moment you say, wow, material is even, and white managed to kind of patch things up. He's defending all his stuff. But look at the passivity of the rook. This rook cannot make a move. And the king on e3, again, very passive, can hardly move. Black, on the other hand, can just do whatever he wants. So, step 1, f5. Again, the idea is that now there's going to be some sort of a, because white is practically in Zugzwang, unable to move his king or rook, because he's going to lose material. If he moves the rook from the file, from the d file, he's going to lose the d pawn. If he moves the rook from the rank, he's going to lose the a3 pawn. So he will try to push his pawns, and black puts the first nail in the coffin. Let's freeze some pawns. h3, h5. If white was about to play g4, forget about it. No chance. So he has to move the king. If he would have played h4, black always has the move g6 at his disposal. So king here, Rook takes, rook c3, rook check. Again, asking the king to choose a side. Are you going to be cut off or are you going to come straight to me? Here, h4. Again, brilliant. The king had to let go of the f pawn, and now we just break all the pawns. Rook to rook to c7. Another idea might have been to take this pawn, but of course, after I take this pawn, all the white pawns fall. After gh4, rook h4, and I'm about to take here, here, here. It's almost like a lesson in geometry. Everything just falls apart. So he tries activity, and now another interesting variation. If he would have taken the pawn immediately, then after rook takes here, rook takes here, rook takes g3, king e5, king e2, here, and the game goes on. Sure, black has good winning chances, but white is still fighting. Instead, he just gave him no chance. He went rook a4, simply realizing that all those pawns on the king side are not advanced. None of them are about to queen. But if he wins the pawn on c3, then he has two runners down the board on the queen side. Again, not being greedy. So, rook check, trying to force the king to choose a side. King e4, check, king here, and he took. Rook takes g7. Again, white is making the maximum, but it's not enough in view of the runners on the queen side. King takes pawn, trying to freeze the pawns, but they just keep advancing. Okay, now on b4, rook b5, yes?
What if he had played rook check on e3 before he took the pawn on h4? Right there, rook check, Rooks.
As white?
Yeah.
Here.
Protecting his pawn.
Okay, then I will probably go, oops, 1 second. Then I will probably play here. And after takes, I will just take. And now again, all the pawns are falling. By the time you will play rook, you cannot play rook g3. If you play rook e7, I will just take, and I'm taking all the pawns. Very, very difficult position and very brilliantly played by the opponent. So let's see what happened. Check here, took here, 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 here. Here after b4, rook b5, would have frozen the pawns a little bit and prevented black from taking the pawn on h5. So he simply played rook b3. Beautiful little move. The a pawn can run just as well, and I'm not letting the pawn conquer the 5th rank. Again, passive, just making the rook's position more and more passive. So after rook here, rook takes pawn. You let go of my pawn so I can take your own pawns, and now he resigned. Nothing he can do about it. If you attack any of my pawns, like if you go rook b7, rook b3, rook a7, rook a3, just beautiful, easy win. Okay, for dessert, I'm going to show you a position. I always like to show a position that is kind of unique and unusual. I already showed the position with the 5 bishops, even though it's really cute. So I will show you, this is really, really hard. I'm going to show you this one. Oopsie. Okay. This is again a composition, and it's an ending. I guess it qualifies. But I'm not showing this to learn something, but just to be, maybe as I was, really amazed at how beautiful chess can be. And yeah, this position, white is down material, because black has 2 knights and for a rook. And of course you can take one of the knights, but then you will lose your passed pawn. So like if you play g takes h5 check, king takes f7 attacking the rook, and I have lots of pawns, not to mention that I'm about to play b2, b1, protected by my knight. White really looks like he's about to lose the game. But watch what happens. Really, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant compositions I've seen. f8 queen. Okay, that was simple. Rook takes. Now, g takes h5 check, an in-between move, gaining the knight before that knight moves. King f7. Now you say to yourself, well, looks like black solved all his problems. Because, I mean, if you trade rooks right now, you will just lose. I mean, the pawn is going to go, there's a pawn threatening to go up to b2, and in any event, materially speaking, I have more than enough stuff. Watch what he does. I don't know, can you guess the next move? Anybody want to take a guess? It's really, really difficult. Well, I'll show you. Let's see if you can enjoy it. Rook h8. I know, you're looking at me just as if I'm drunk, but I'm not, I promise you. This really is the move, Rook h8. And really a beautiful move. Now I'm threatening Rook f1 mate. You have no time to push the pawn or do anything with the knight because Rook f1 now is checkmate. So, what can you do? You have to take the rook. What other moves do you have? I'm about to go Rook f1 check. I'm going to be up 2 rooks. So you take, check, the king is buried, and now comes another beautiful move. Before you start pushing your pawns and releasing yourself, h6. Again, the beauty of chess. White is down a knight and 2 pawns in an endgame. All he has is a rook. But again, the placement, look at the place. The rook is buried in the corner. And now the point, of course, is if you play, let's see, if you take, then of course king here and Rook g1 mate is coming. So you can take it. On the other hand, I'm threatening to play anyways. King here followed by Rook f8 check. And what else can you do? No way to get out of the box. The knight is too late. If you try to bring your knight out, I'm just going to go king e7. So white wins, h6 and wins. So Rook h8, really one of the nicest moves I've ever seen. Okay guys, thank you very much. I enjoyed your time. Hope you enjoyed and learned something as well.